stretched out career. Most of these guys, they're in and out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we think about the guy who was just killed, Joe McKnight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he was the hottest thing, and then he's in and out of the league in 3 years, and you don't hear about him. So, I mean, there's a lot that comes into play there. Dr. Michelle, since you, I tell you this much, you see this from a point of view or perspective, because you are, at a lot of games, you are the medical doctor for these games for youth. What are your thoughts on that?
Even at that particular level, you have your kids that get injured, and the parents are upset if you say, okay, they're injured and they need to sit out and go to the doctor or get checked out and come back. Parents are upset because they feel that their child deserves to play, not taking in consideration that there is life after that particular game.
Right.
It's not the end. It's just the beginning for them.
Okay. I mean, I see it from the other perspective, because I watched my daughter play CYO for 4 years and 1 year at AAU, and I see those parents that are thinking that their child is the next phenom.
They all are the next phenom. I know my kids are.
Come on now. I mean, but you're saying that and you're being sarcastic.
No, but I mean, we all feel that our child is the best athlete in the world, but at the same time, we have to realize that it's just for that period of time for a majority of the kids out there.
Right.
Some will progress on and play Division I basketball or football and then progress on to professional, or maybe go overseas and play.
Right. But the percentage
it dwindles down as the further you go up.
Right.
So we have to be realistic.
Right.
And we need to make sure that whenever our kids are playing any sport, that they're playing safely.
Correct. Scott, you stepped up to the mic. You had a few things on your chest that you wanted to.
Okay, just a couple of things real quick. And when you talk about professional athletes in general, it's a short window of time in which these athletes have an opportunity to make whatever millions of dollars, hypothetically, that they're making. Some NFL players don't even make the big numbers because they're on league minimums. If you're saying the average person or average athlete has 4 years, well, if somebody just played for 20, they actually skewed the number. So it's really not 4. It's more like 3 or 2.5.
Right.
And then you're talking about high level, especially on the football side, of career-ending injury. Then you have to look back after your career is over. Well, what did you do before that? Well, if your whole life has been geared in one particular direction,
right,
you have to now look back and say, well, hope they had a really good quality education. Did they get it along the way? I mean, there's so many pitfalls along that line. And if we go all the way back down to the AAU, CYO ranks, for my always thing is when I always talk about sports in general, I always talk about next level. Quantifying what is the next level? What are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to do with your talent? Now, if you think the NBA or the NFL or professional sports is the win, no, you're wrong. But I try and tell people, I have parents try and, tone it down a little bit. Let's quantify the win. The win is getting better. The win is life lessons, life skills. And if we're quantifying the win with a scholarship, well, then no, a lot of people are going to fall short. But then again, if you're quantifying the win as having a better experience, learning how to compete, those life lessons, life skills, then the win is right there in front of you. And it's just learning how to compete. A lot of times, especially in today's day and age, competing is almost a bad word in some areas, if you will. So I've got a lot to say about it, but the bottom line...
I think it's good. And there's a lot to be said on it, because I sit here and I remember I had a conversation with my friend Rosalind Ross, and we were talking about AAU, and we were talking, there was various topics on what is it doing to the pro sport. And I went back to the point of, okay, I'm 35 years old now, Scott. My knees are busted. the jump shot is no longer falling, and I can't put 2 or 3 sentences together, and all my money is burnt out because, I didn't manage it correctly.
But then who's in your corner that's helping you along the way? Or do you not know any better?
That's the question that you have to ask some of these athletes as they come in. What's the framework? What's the foundation for them as they come into these leagues nowadays?
Okay, but the foundation started even before that. In those situations, if you're telling me we can't put sentences together, you were set up to fail from the start.
Okay.
So that goes before you even became a pro athlete. That goes back to your high school. That goes back to grade school.
Right.
So the bottom line is you have to look at really who's around these young men and young women as they're going forward. The day of just being able to put a ball in a hoop and thinking that you're going to matriculate and be NCAA qualified, those days are over.
Right.
I mean, there are requirements, and there are a lot of young athletes out there right now that have what you would call next level talent, but don't have next level grades. Now, you have to question who's around these young men and young women. I mean, that's where you have to look at it, because if they didn't have the proper guidance and they're formative, they're not going to just get it now.
True. It's just, I see it as, and these are usually discussions I have on the podcast where you have the young man. Do we even discuss the Johnny Manziel? Maybe tonight, because usually we talk about the young man who was in the projects, who had his family, who had to get his family out, who goes to school, who's pushed through all his life, and then he goes to college for 1 year. He attends the first semester, and then he's out. Why? Because he's thinking of the dollars down the line.
Correct.
Okay? So, it's wrong all the way, and then, do we even talk about Ben Simmons? He was kind of like, hey, I'm just here, and then I'm out the door, and, he busted his knee.
Right.
So the question is, number one, they get that first check, they blow through it, they don't know what to do, Scott, then what? Because year 3, year 4, they're out the league.
You're absolutely right. I mean, that is the one and done scenario.
Right.
And let's be honest, when we talk about one and done, that's a plan.
Mm-hmm.
It's geared. They've been geared for that. Educationally, they've been geared for that. They've been geared for that. I always like to look at it this way, and maybe I'm wrong, and maybe this is not a popular belief, but when we look at who we aspire to be as successful people in this world, be they athletes or be they people in different professions, they're generally unbalanced people.
Okay.
They're generally not we all talk about well-balanced. What is well-balanced? Well, everybody strives to be successful is not necessarily a balanced person. So this one-and-done athlete, their whole life has been geared for this moment, for that check. What else are they geared for?
Nothing.
Okay. So at that point, when I'm in college, hypothetically, if I'm in college, I've been geared for this moment. I've got no other choice but to cash in.
Right.
I didn't just become an academic.
Right.
That's not on the table for me at that point in time. My academic foundation was somewhere way back.
Mm-hmm.
We can look at the studies if we just want to get into education for a half a second.
Go ahead.
But if we look at the studies, they'll tell you that academically you are programmed to be on a certain path by 4th, 5th grade.
Correct.
So what's happening for all those people, all those lost children in the education system who don't have those fundamentals in the early stages of life? They're already on a path for not success. I don't have the stats in front of me, but you can go back and I remember seeing things like FBI creates their statistics based on academic statistics.
Okay.
And they try and predict how many jails they need to build based off of academic statistics.
And that's starting as early as 2nd and 3rd grade, they said.
So if you're already on the path, and we also have to talk about what is demonstrative improvement when it comes to education.
Okay.
So because if you're not on the path, how much more improvement, how much rudimentary work has to be done to get these kids on the right. So, I mean, I can segue and go into a billion different ways, but my point I'm trying to get at is when you get to the pro level or to that decision-making time, that decision's already kind of been made. The smart choice is to take that money because, a smart person will say, well, I can always go back to school.
Right.
My whole life's been geared this way. If I haven't been geared towards academia, I can't work up and say, I'm going to be a doctor today.
Right.
That's not on the table.
Right. Hey, I just want to wrap it back around. I want to wrap it back around on the lines of the parent that doesn't have that realistic expectation. So they come to NX.
Sure.
And their child is the next star. And let's just say maybe the coach doesn't call their number or doesn't run enough plays, quantifiable for that specific parent because they're a star. Okay. How do you temper that?
Well, there are two things. When it comes to, let's codify it for, let's say, basketball, for instance. We have to decide what kind of team are we on. Are we on a developmental team?
Right.
Or are we on a high-level, exposure team? Now, if we're on a high-level exposure team, minutes are earned. Simple as that.
Okay.
That's demonstrated through practice, through training, and through actual gameplay. So that, to me, is, basketball is a sport of limited opportunity. Only 5 people on the court at one time.
Okay.
Even in the best teams that you look at, NBA or college-wise, the best players may only score 2 or 3 of them may score double digits, not the whole team. So it's very hard to make that parent at ease because that particular team may just not be the right fit. Now, if it's a developmental team, well, then, the range should be a little lighter. The coach should be able to get that child in. They should be able to play more, and they need to be able to develop. And you only get to develop through gameplay and through actual practice and training. So, to me, the answer to the questions are very simple for me. Doesn't mean that you want to hear it as a parent.
Okay.
And it's just one of those things, and you have to find the right situation. We're not for everybody, and not every team is for everybody. And that is the one thing that a lot of parents do is they hop around from program to program to program to program, trying to find the right fit for their son or their daughter because they believe that they're the next biggest thing.
But that's a reality, though, and it's something that everyone has to be comfortable knowing that even though my child is a great athlete, he might not be the greatest one, and this might truly be the end of his career or her career. It might not go anywhere past high school.
Right. So hey, I just want to jump in and say, just in case if anyone is confused, that we are not speaking with Mark Singleton right now. We're speaking with Scott Kershaw of NX Generation. It's a valid point. Rich, do you have a question?
No, not really. I mean, I've got my 3 boys. They're all in college now. Two of which have graduated for a few years. But we went through all the programs. I mean, they played football, they played lacrosse, they did wrestling, they did basketball, and they did varsity on all of them. So I mean, there is still that point where it's not just the educator's responsibility. I see it's also the parents' responsibility to really, you gotta check them at a certain point. You gotta understand that, look, you're good, right? You're good, but is there anybody on your team that's a little better than you? And so the answer is going to be yes. And then they say, fine, okay, well, so that's just your school. So in the rest of our district, is there anyone better than that guy? And of course, the answer is yes. And, you can take it for a little farther, the district, the county, the state, the country, obviously. It's like, okay, so you're good and all that, but you realize that there's that many people who you recognize as being better than you. And, that pipe dream of the pro ball, whatever sport it may be, you got to come to that reckoning moment and say, look, you can go out there, you can have all the fun you want, but this is not going to be the life story. And, hopefully that's that point where they recognize, like, okay, you know what? I got to make a a second plan to use in education and not just have a ball in my hand and try to make that the one-shot deal.
No, that's a valid point. And like I said, I just want to double back that this is Late Night Parents with Dr. Michelle, Scott Kershaw, Rich Valdez. We're virtually having a conversation. It originated out of Rudolph Foods. It really focused on the NFL, and we were primarily talking about, concussions and skyrocketing medical costs, and, just the lack of longevity with some of these players, and, at that point. Then the conversation moved towards, how do I say it, youth basketball, youth sports. And I guess some of these, some of the parents, their unrealistic expectation. And that's something I know, Scott, you can speak very, fondly about, because I'm sure you're dealing with these parents every day, because some way or another, you have to kind of let them down a nice way.
I find it to be not that hard, because it's as simple as going to an exposure basketball tournament.
Mm-hmm.
And we say, you know what? It's time to test ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go out and let's see what it's like to get off Long Island and play in the 5 boroughs.
Right.
Let's see what it's like to get out of New York State and play an exposure tournament. And it's a whole new world.
Yep.
It's extremely a whole new world. And when I say it's a whole new world, I mean, we haven't talked on the issues of reclassification, where your son is now, or daughter is now, playing against kids who are 2, 3, and 4 years older than them. How do you compete with that? When I talk about these children being geared in a certain way, you have to look at that. I mean, New York state law says that you're able to still be enrolled in New York schools at high school up to the age of 19.
Right.
So how does a 14-year-old or a 15 or a 16 or a 17-year-old compete with another student athlete that's 2 and 3 and 4 years older than them? So, but by the way, if you're talking about that scholarship opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
then that's what we're talking about. Because if you look at any NCAA Division I, Division II roster, you're talking about young men and young women who are not 17, 18 years old. They're 19, they're 20. You have to take a look at that. And that's what's really out there. So even if you are really good for your age, you still may not be really good. It's just what it is.
No, it's I'm going to bring this subject to a close right now with, so for 4 years, my daughter participated in